khadi has been conceived as the foundation and image of ahimsa. A real khadi wearer will not utter an untruth. A real khadi wearer will harbor no violence, no deceit, no impurity. Gandhi from Mahatma and Volume 4.
Those of us who have been involved in nonviolent campaigns, myself definitely included, have often really regretted our lack of a symbol, a thing, as concrete and as powerful as khadi. Khadi was the way of breaking the economic stranglehold of the British on the Indians by taking away Indian cotton, shipping it to the mills in Lancashire, manufacturing clothes, and selling them back to the Indians. A grotesquely inefficient and exploitive system. So khadi was breaking that stranglehold on that level. On another level, it was back down to what he called bread labor, because you could have spinning wheels going on, and he did have spinning wheels going on in practically every household in India. Every little village hut could get a tukli and produce cloth. And then, of course, he took a further step of organizing that whole system on the national level so that the people who harvested the cotton, the people who spun it into yarn, the people who made the cloth out of that yarn, and the people who sold it and distributed it, and the people who wore it were all part of a single system. And unless you have that kind of concreteness, it is very difficult to sense your community, your unity with others. So here's the miracle of Gandhi, whose mind is up in the loftiest levels of idealism on the one hand, and grounded in the most basic realities of food, clothing, and shelter on the other hand. What a miracle he was.
And so brilliant to ground the ideas and ideals of an entire movement in a physical action, something that people could do, something that they could see, they could recognize. And not only was it useful as a symbol, like wearing a pin or wearing a ribbon, like we do today, maybe wear a flag or something, but it was actually physically useful. It was your clothing, but it was also a way to save money. It represented purity and independence and simplicity, all good things, but it also led to independence from imperial control, some levels of economic freedom. It led to environmental shifts. And of course, it led to a weakening of their opponent, who was buying their materials, shipping them to another place, changing them, shipping them back, and then selling it all back to the Indians as just an exploitative system. And so it was such a powerful symbol and method. And of course, all of these activist educators that I listen to now all have an idea of what the khadi of today should be for each of our communities. And I find it wonderfully empowering to think that it could be something as simple as, for instance, in my life, gardening. Growing your own food has powerful impacts upon the space around you, the local environment, your health, your community, your pocketbook. And I feel like there's many of these methods that become available to us over time as we start to learn more about the possibilities in our lives. But I would ask each of you to put down into the comment section, what do you think the khadi of your community and your movements of the future should be?
Science of war leads one to dictatorship, pure and simple. Science of nonviolence can alone lead one to pure democracy. Gandhi, October 15, 1938.
I would say that on the political level, this is the most important application of the principle that means and ends are interconvertible, that you cannot use violent means, of which war is probably the most violent, to bring about a nonviolent end, which is a fully representative democratic society. So here in the United States, we are experiencing the inability or the paradoxicality of the attempt to have a secure country on the basis of an enormous military. And not to mention the incredible expenditure that it takes to sustain that military machinery, whether we're using it or not. I think this is something that the peace movement has recognized and has spoken to, but it's important because, well, it's important for many reasons, but one of them is this is a level on which we can reach ordinary people, many of whom are endorsing violence for the use of establishing democracy. And I've mentioned war, but the same thing is true really on the level of criminal justice. We think that being violent or criminals will bring us a secure domestic society, and we think that maintaining a terrific military will bring us security in the international regime. Neither of those work, and we seem to be stuck in a version of what Freud would call the repetition compulsion, because we don't see the second half of Gandhi's truism, that if you want democracy, you have to have nonviolence.
If you want democracy, you have to have nonviolence. That's right, because the idea of might makes right, which is what war is based upon. A war is won by whoever is more powerful, who has bigger weapons, is more willing to throw more people at a problem. And the logic of that is the same logic that leads to dictatorship, to kings, and to rulers, because there's a belief that might makes right. And so whoever's in charge is worth more and gets to make the rules. And the idea of democracy being that everybody's equal, true democracy, everybody has a choice, everybody gets a vote, everyone's vote counts equally, and we can have opinions about whether or not that happens in our world. But the concept of pure democracy relies upon cooperation, equality, freedom to express, and an educated populace, a safe populace. And all of these are reliant upon structures of peace and nonviolence, and we can get there. So if we value democracy, if we value that freedom, then we must also value nonviolence.
I may tell you that I am constantly evolving, and the application of my principles is ever widening. Gandhi, from Mahatma, Volume 4.
This was a very heartwarming and inspiring characteristic of Gandhiji, that he never stopped learning. You know, again, if I could talk about a Greek philosopher, in this case, Solon, he said, "Aie geirasko pola didaskamanos." Hope you like the rhythm of that hexameter. He says, I'm growing older all the time, and I'm learning all the time. And that's what we human beings should be doing on this planet. That shows that what Gandhi was doing was not dogmatic. It was based on eternal principles, but they did not become ideologies the way many people's principles do in our day and age. So you could be constantly growing on the level of application, constantly responding to the needs of the times and of your fellow human beings, while never losing sight of that underlying principle, which is the unity of life, and that the only way to bring that unity of life to full reality is through nonviolent means.
And I feel like that space of what in popular Buddhist terminology we call having a beginner's mind, always allowing yourself to begin anew with something, to be fresh, that Gandhi here is exemplifying the willingness to always learn, which means the willingness to be wrong, the willingness to not know, to allow somebody else to know more than you. These are all qualities of humility and even are required for a state of emotional peace and balance. And so if we can ever hold within ourselves that we want a world of peace and cooperation, part of what we have to hold is that we don't necessarily know best, that maybe other people can know better. Somebody else might be in a better position to help right now. I'm going to hand over power to somebody else. And again, this is talking about this quality of democratic ability, this space within which your society can be truly democratic, is because we're willing to hold hands and to reach out, to ask for help, to work together. These are peaceful qualities. These are qualities of nonviolence. And I just appreciate so much that this is a part of the discussion, that Gandhi is here saying, hey, it's not just about having somebody who's a super expert, I'm the master, I know everything, somebody who can't apologize. We all know people like this at home and in politics, perhaps, that can never say that they're wrong because their identity is based upon being the one that's right, being the one that's most powerful. Might makes right, the same quality within military. And so to be somebody who is willing to put that down and say, I don't know, let's find out together, means that you're open, means that you're willing, that you're not going to use a fist but an open hand in order to solve the problem.
We must therefore purge ourselves of hatred. Gandhi, from the Quit India speech, August 9th, 1942.
This was, of course, a critical and extremely portentous moment in the history of the freedom struggle. What he's saying is absolutely vintage Gandhi, that we have to be doing this without hatred. Hatred would injure our spirits and definitely detract from the success of the movement. And I want to say that Gandhi's not the first person in history to recognize this. In the American Revolution, there were even some that said, in a struggle so grand, hatred would be out of place. It's not the exact language, but it was exactly the same sentiment. So this is a universal law, that it's amazing not only how much we can achieve without anger, without hatred, but that it's so much more than ever we could possibly hope to achieve when actuated by anger. And that goes also for the long-term consequences. Ending up being friends with your opponent is an infinitely more constructive place to end up when you're finished with the struggle.
And again, if I may reshape things in terms of medicine, that hatred is a poison. It doesn't just poison your community, it doesn't just poison your struggle, whatever work that you're involved with, it poisons you. It poisons your heart. It is directly damaging to every part of your nature. And if we're going to build a movement that lasts, if we are going to heal the world in a way that lasts, it has to be built on something that is nourishing, that grows over time, that flourishes, that doesn't destroy itself and the people around it. It's just antithetical to building a good strategy. So even from the perspective of game theory and strategic planning for a movement to make change, even in that level of mathematics, hatred is a big problem. And of course, in the interpersonal level, hatred is something that will destroy everything that you value. So learning to heal yourself of that poison of hatred, again, from the Buddhist perspective, greed, hatred, and delusion, are the three poisons. These are things that will wreck a society and burn down a life. So if we're going to shape our lives in a way that is peaceful and compassionate, even to ourselves, in the very least, we have to first stop doing damage to ourselves before we start to try to heal the space around us.
To have a conviction that there is violence or sin in a certain course of conduct is one thing. To have the power of acting up to such a conviction is quite another. Gandhi, Satyagraha in South Africa.
Of course, this is an age-old human problem. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna even says to Sri Krishna in chapter 3, why is it that I keep on doing this thing that I know is wrong? It's about the disconnect between our knowledge, our intellect, if you will, and our will. And connecting the will to the intellect, to what we know is right, is the entire trajectory, I would say, of spiritual practice.
And gosh, Michael Nagler, always able to connect a beautiful quote, ancient Greek phrase, Sanskrit poetry to the moment. And I can tell you, having spent many hours talking to him, that he can do this in casual conversation. This isn't something he's prepared for. He's really remarkable that way. But to recognize that, again, violence is something that wrecks everything around it. And so once we recognize that we simply want what's best for ourselves, we simply want what's best for the people that we love in our world. If you can think of somebody that you wholeheartedly wish the best for, and then you recognize that there's this thing, this poison, that is likely to cause them problems in every area of their life, to cause them untold suffering in every position in their life. What do? Do you notice yourself, once you recognize that, wanting to protect them from this quality, either within themselves or from the people around them? Of course you do. And that's a conviction that builds. It's a source of energy to move forward because we are protecting something that we love. We are healing something that we care about. And like Arjuna was saying from the Bhagavad Gita, that why do I do these things when I know that they're wrong? And it's such a human issue. And in part, it's because we're not seeing things clearly. We're not recognizing at a more than intellectual level what we know is important. And so part of this ability to see things clearly, which in a way is one way that you could define awakening, then that means to embody the truth, to recognize it on all levels. And again, there are practices for you to help you take what you recognize on an intellectual level and help to begin to feel it, to embody it. And it takes time. The mind moves differently. It moves at a different pace than our body does. But over time, these things can merge, but you only want them to merge in the direction of peace and wholeness and love. But there are methods for that. And I encourage everybody listening to take the time to rededicate themselves to those practices because they are worth it, and you will make our whole world a better place if you do.
When there is no desire for fruit, there is also no temptation for untruth or himsa. Gandhi, Mahatma, Volume 2.
Now, this is a real breakthrough, that there should be no temptation to get the fruit, meaning personal benefit for oneself, is in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's an age-old value that Indian actors knew of, which we don't very much here in the West. But he goes on to say that when you liberate yourself from that desire, I've got to get something out of this, it also takes out of it the sting of himsa, as he was describing. So he's adding something once again to the traditional knowledge of Indian Vedantic lore and articulating it with his immediate political struggle. This is very typical of the way Gandhi operated.
And we build a powerful movement toward healing within ourselves when we are able to get past the need for things to work out the way that we want them to, for us to get the credit, for us to win the award, for us to be the one that takes home the prize, whatever that quality is. And instead, again, once we recommit ourselves to the practice itself, the method itself, the walk, the service itself being the point, then suddenly we're free from the difficulty and the suffering that comes when it doesn't turn out exactly the way we want it, which of course it never does, because that's not how life works. And so to become free of that on an interpersonal level, of course, makes for much happier people. But also as a movement, when we can recognize that we are working together for the sake of working together, that we're making the world a better place one person at a time for the sake of making the world a better place one person at a time, not just to get some abstract goal that we're aiming for. It's useful to have goals, but recognizing that life will change, things will switch around, and we'll have to change again. But always recommitting to the principles, the methods, and the techniques of peace and nonviolence.
Every village has to become a self-sufficient republic. Gandhi, January 18th, 1922.
The philosophical concept of unity and diversity was native to Indian thinking, and because it was part of Indian society, Indian culture never was uniform in the way that some European countries are, and particularly the vast United States really has very little in the way of regional differences compared to the regional articulate differences in India. And that, of course, nowadays includes different religions. And even within Hinduism, there are so many different ways to be a devoted Hindu that diversity was natural in Gandhi's thinking, and it was not threatening. We sometimes feel that anything that's different has to be homogenized to our way of thinking, our way of being, but it was a great advantage for India that diversity had always been welcomed and never felt to be a threat to unity. On the contrary, the more you could actually be yourself, the better contributor you were to the overall unity. It's really a grand concept.
And again, I've learned so much just from walking through this series with you here. Thank you for joining us. That one of the statements Michael made, which struck home to me, is that differences are something that are on the outside. And we want to recognize and appreciate those in the same way that we appreciate that the internal qualities, the humanness, are all the same. And by recognizing that beauty, that a culture that has many differences is actually stronger, it's healthier. In the same way that, again, I'm a gardener on a farm that is monocropping. They're all growing one thing, one kind of plant the same way. Maybe they're clones of each other. These are the farms that at some point or another become decimated because some fungal form or something comes through and it destroys the entire farm in one go. Whereas if there's genetic diversity, either of the same kind of crop but from different sources in different spaces or just many different kinds of plants growing, then the farm itself is much safer from every kind of pest and disease. It has resilience. and all of these different kinds of plants and insects and mycelia and life that's growing there, they actually support each other in very definite and measurable ways. It's actually quite remarkable how a garden, how a farm works like a community. Not to make it difficult for something to thrive, but actually by making it possible in a time that it's not. And I grew up in a culture that seems to believe that monocultures, where everybody's exactly the same, believes the same thing, thinks the same way, does the same work, wants the same thing, somehow they think that that is better, and they feel very threatened by anything who thinks different. And I don't know enough about other cultures to know how widespread of a problem that is. I imagine in today's day and age that it's a widespread problem. But recognizing that it's that diversity of thought, the diversity of life and people and ways of being, that's what makes for a resilient society. That's what makes for a vibrant culture. And without that, you're missing on those things. And so a self-sufficient republic has to embrace all of that diversity because everything is held within that embrace. And when it becomes some form of collection of single-celled organisms, a kind of monocultured farm, all it takes is one problem to come through that they are not immune to, and everybody falls together. And we want the opportunity for everyone to rise together instead.
Religion is never opposed to economics, but it is always ranged against profits. Gandhi, Ashram Observances in Action.
Yeah, it took E.F. Schumacher, who's the author of Small is Beautiful, to really study Gandhi and interpret him to the modern world. And I remember talking with Fritz one time, and he said something that he's also said in public, that it was a big aha for him when he realized that Gandhi was an economist. Because he was not a mathematical economist, he was not a theoretician in that sense, but he had a deeply grounded feeling in the economic dimension of human welfare. He knew that he could accomplish a great deal by eradicating poverty. It was not just the material dimension, but dignity, a sense of empowerment, a sense of one's true humanity was all tied up with one's economic capacities. So Gandhi was, I think, unique in this regard, and he benefited very, very much from the clarity of that vision and from his ability to live it out by being on the material level amazingly simple in his own life and habits.
And I wonder here in this, I'm wondering if this is a joke, a pun of some kind. I don't know if he wrote this in English or not, but religion is never opposed to economics, but it is always ranged against profits. Profits, the pun, the religious profit. I'm just wondering if that's a pun that he's making here. But to recognize that, again, when we are arranging our lives around gain, around getting something, and that's the point of a space, and a number of ashrams, a number of healing centers and monasteries that I've visited, and places that are, and clinics and places that I've been to where supposedly what they are for is healing or growth or awakening, that very clearly it's a business arranged around making money. And that's their number one goal. And everything else is set to the side. And you see that in every aspect of life. And again, it's a great poison. And you can imagine one of my favorite characters from the Bible book, Jesus coming through with his whip and chasing people away from these spaces of growth and healing and community, saying, this is not what this place is for. We are here to come together. We are here to grow and to heal, which may require economics. We still have to eat, we still have to clothe ourselves and keep warm. And yet, too often, we adjust our priorities and some form of greed comes in, and it becomes about gain for the sake of gain, rather than gain for the sake of supporting that which is most important in our lives.
There is not a single virtue that aims at or is content with the welfare of the individual alone. Conversely, there is not a single offense which does not directly or indirectly affect many others besides the actual offender. Gandhi, from Ethical Religion.
In Gandhi's view of humanity, as we see this over and over again, it was of a unity and not of disparate individuals. And that unity was felt on a non-physical level, so that if one person offended, fell into a bad frame of mind, hated others, that hatred would register in a mysterious way in the minds and hearts of other people. Now, in a way, this is a very challenging and could be demoralizing vision of the world, but it's also the opposite. It's also very inspiring because it means that, look, I can't change your mental outlook directly, but I can change mine. And by changing mine, I have influenced yours. So it opens up a big dimension for nonviolence.
And there's a lot of wonderful scientific data now showing how we impact each other's lives. And not simply through our behavior, not simply what we buy or the charity that we give, but every little thing that we do has an impact in small ways. For instance, if I wear a t-shirt that has a logo on it, other people see that if you go out and about, depending on how many people are there. If I was to go visit a big Costco store, a big box store, it may be that that shirt is registered and seen by hundreds of people. And that's a pretty big impact. Just that small act. And how much more so when you smile or frown. If you were to shout at somebody or use a religious or some kind of ethical slur at somebody, you take them down a peg. That affects countless numbers of people, not just the people that are impacted, and of course it affects you, but they then take that good or bad behavior and they mirror that in their lives because you've had such a strong impact on them. And especially the people who are very easily impacted, because there's some percentage of humanity that is very easily swayed emotionally, ethically. They kind of do what they see and do what they're told. And of course, that's true for all of us at some extent, but some people are especially susceptible. In Taoism, we talk about the 3 of 10. There's the 3 of 10 that are easily moved around. And that third of humanity deserves to be treated well, to be shown a path of love, of kindness, of friendship, because then they take that into their lives and reflect that out. But even if you never see another person, there's a lot of reason to believe that you changing yourself doesn't just change your own experience of life, although that's a good enough reason, but it changes the whole world because of the quality of connection, of interconnection that we all share, that it really is all one field that we're in. So take the time today to center yourself, to find love and peace, and to be that quality. And even if you don't go outside your door, you're still having a big impact in the world.
I refuse to suspect human nature. It is bound to respond to any noble and friendly action. Gandhi, Young India, August 4th, 1920.
I'm getting two important things out of this remark of Gandhi's. First, that it's a very important lesson and a hard lesson for us to learn, which is the ability to trust people even though they have betrayed our trust. And conspicuously, Gandhi did that with General Smuts at least twice. The guy basically just tricked him, betrayed him. Gandhi still trusted him, and by golly, at the end, he responded to that trust and became actually one of Gandhi's fervent admirers. So that's one thing, that trusting people helps them to be trustworthy. And the other thing is the infallible effectiveness of a nonviolent approach. That in Metta, we talk about work versus work, and we say that if you are nonviolent in a given situation, it will have a positive effect. It may not be exactly what you wanted it to do completely right in that moment, but it will be something that you can build on. Nonviolence is always effective, just as violence is always effective in the opposite direction.
Always continuing this important theme, drawing us back and back to this same quality of awareness that when we are still and nourished and safe and quiet and healthy, that it is our nature to be friendly, to be clear and kind, to be present. We don't become different people. We are at heart our most and truest selves in those moments of stillness and peace. We're not reacting anymore. We're not leaping out and trying to protect ourselves. We're not flashing into anger because we feel that we have to protect ourselves. These qualities of our nature that are often considered our worst qualities are usually responses to violence, a need to create an opportunity for something when things are going wrong. But if we can create a safe and healthy atmosphere for everybody, what happens is we discover that humans are beautiful creatures. And there's so many of us that have become pessimistic, and our view of other humans is very dark, to say the least. And I feel like it's a misunderstanding. What they're seeing is a kind of disease. It's a kind of illness. But there's a cure. We simply have to take the time to administer that cure to the whole world, starting with ourselves.
I would like people to compete with me in my contentment. Gandhi, Young India, April 30th, 1925.
Who was it who said, "There is no one happier than I"? I think it was the Buddha. Again, we are seeing the reverse of an uncritical belief that most of us have, that abstinence, doing without things, struggling for others instead of oneself must be a hardship. But that's a misunderstanding of human nature. We see again and again that when people sacrifice for others, they gain infinitely more than if they had worked just for themselves. It says something about the unity and interconnectedness of our well-being.
So true. And again, let me speak as somebody who spent a lot of time around cultivators, people who cultivate their internal qualities. This is a crowd of the happiest and most well-balanced people. Of course, if you visit any random monastery, the most often that you'll run into people who are there because they're having a great deal of trouble. Many monasteries function more as hospitals for people in great distress. But if you can speak to the cultivated people that have been there for a while, maybe the teachers, what you find is a crowd of people who are often very well balanced inside. And I've met a number of people like this. I would never compare myself to Gandhi or to the Buddha, of course, but even the attainment of contentment all of the time, it's not that far away from most people. And so if you ever want to, Come hang out at the monastery, spend a couple of years with me, and you'll see that it's possible. Go spend time in any healing space where people are well cultivated, and you'll see that it's possible. And I often have a fantasy of, now that we have the ability to measure brainwave patterns, and for instance, very famously, actually, I think it was in Tucson, Arizona, there was a monk that was being scanned, and he was shown to be the happiest person that had ever registered. He was just lit up inside with joy all of the time. He has a number of TED Talks. I can't remember his name at the moment. But this is not an uncommon thing. And I have this vision that we can create video games or board games or sports where the winner is not the person who makes the most points or picks up the ball and does something with it the best, but rather who is having the most fun doing it, whatever it is that they do. And the winner is the most joyful person the one who is able to squeeze out every scrap of pleasure and enjoyment and satisfaction from whatever that practice, that sport is. That should be the real winner. And certainly they already are in a number of ways. So for you people out there who are scientists and game creators, you let me know when that's possible, and I'll become an Olympian.
No big or swift movement can be carried on without bold risks, and life will not be worth living if it is not attended with large risks. Gandhi, Young India, December 15, 1921.
Well, congratulations, risk takers. You're being validated here. It's not that you take risks for their own sake. It's not a kind of thrill seeking. It's a recognition that if you're trying to do something important, it's bound to be outside the box. And therefore, it's bound to arouse invidious disregard from others. And that has to be put up with. There's no royal road to the kind of human development and social reform that Gandhi, in his boundless ambition, aimed at and achieved.
Gosh, I have so much respect for people who are willing to go out and take bold risks in order to help the world. And so if you are one of those people that this is reaching, thank you so much for doing that. Please do take care of yourself. Don't take unnecessary risks. But I recognize that there are people that walk into the middle of the war zone in order to help with medical care or to stand in a space and protect children. And I honor these people so much. And I hope that you do too. And so if you are one of those people, again, we are very grateful for your work. Please take care of yourself. Often life does require those large risks, and at some point we probably are all forced into those situations where to protect what we care about the most, you have to take a large risk. And may we all be safe. May we all find our way through those situations, and may peace and safety spread across the earth.
Leave the outward expression, the doctrine, the dogma, and the form, and behold the unity and oneness of spirit. Then there will be no need to divide this universe of ours between heaven and hell. No need to divide fellow beings into virtuous and vicious, the eternally damned and the eternally saved. Gandhi, Young India, February 9th, 1928.
Yeah, gosh. Just this afternoon, I was meditating on a passage from the Chinese philosopher Seng Tsan, and he says, "Make 1,000th of an inch distinction, heaven and earth swing apart." even a little bit of disunity. Now, we're not talking about recognizing superficial differences, but sensing actual disunity among living creatures, even a little bit, goes a long way in a harmful direction. So, as unnatural and as difficult as it may be, we have to constantly be involved in this struggle to detect the underlying unity among all superficial differences. In fact, I said it was difficult, but I think it's actually a thrilling kind of struggle. It's so rewarding to see the unity underlying differences, especially the differences that make us feel uncomfortable with our fellow human beings. The ability to stop and think, oh, well, I see what he was after, and it's the same thing I'm after, but he's approaching it in a different way. That's the heart and soul of the nonviolent worldview.
Always returning to this internal exploration, these deep practices. In this case, what Gandhi is referring to as the unity and the oneness of spirit. And it is true that you will get the chance to talk to somebody that maybe for the first time in deep meditation, they come to this realization. They see clearly this deep relationship, this wholeness of our beingness around the world. And it changes people. Even if they are only able to retain that insight for a short time, you see the difference in their eyes. You see how they look around the world differently, recognizing that everything is essentially one and whole. And this realization, of course, bridges every divide of religion and spiritual method all around the world. Mystics and seekers discover this truth. And gosh, can you imagine if this was something that we actually somehow led people to understanding in schools? I don't know how you'd have to reshape the schooling for that. But to take the time to recognize this insight, not from a book, not because you heard somebody else say it, but to see it clearly for yourself, it becomes very obvious. And it transforms every aspect of your life, and certainly every aspect of the way that you walk through the world in this space, free of doctrine, dogma, free of obsession with the form, always beholding the unity and the oneness of spirit.
It is wrong to escape the consequences of one's actions. Gandhi, The Diary of Mahadev Desai.
For Gandhi, as for many people who thought like him, life is a learning experience. Life is a learning project. So if you make a mistake and you suffer for it to some degree, and you wriggle out of that suffering, you don't face up to it, you don't endure it, you haven't learned from that mistake, that means you're going to have to do it again. Because in Buddhism and Hinduism and other traditions, there is a very well-established, uncontroversial idea that life has a purpose, and we're here to learn that purpose. We're not here to enjoy ourselves. And so therefore, to not learn from our mistakes would be a violation of that purpose. It would be a setback. Of course, this is part of an important strategy for activists, and especially nonviolent activists. We have to constantly absorb, assimilate the feedback from our actions. And that means if we make a mistake, and that doesn't just mean that somebody didn't like what we did, but if we do something that's counterproductive, we have to learn why and avoid that kind of mistake again. Now, there's another simpler dimension to what Gandhi undoubtedly intended here, and that has to do with the theory of civil disobedience. That if you deliberately break a law because you feel that it's unjust, then when you accept the consequences for that breakage, you are having the kind of impact that you want on what we call the reference public, the people looking on, be they legislators, teachers, or whoever. You say to them, I know this is a mistake, and I'm willing to take the consequences because I need to show you that there's a flaw in this legislation or custom or whatever. It has a very strong emotional impact on people. Whereas if you do something and then try to wriggle out of the consequences, it has no such impact.
This ties in, I think, with the risk-taking discussion that we were having, that in order to make a big change, you have to be willing to take a big risk. And the willingness to own up for your actions, to accept the consequences, to, for instance, deeply apologize and to mean it, and then to go about repairing some of the damage your actions, your mistakes before caused. It is terrifying. And it's also the only way to live in a wholesome way, where you are accepting yourself, where you're not walking around with guilt or internal damage, a kind of deep disgust for yourself. That's, of course, the reason why we would hide these things, trying to maintain an image or a state of something that's built upon a lie, trying to live as though the actions that you have taken did not create damage. So on a large level, even a country, a society can do something terrible, but without the willingness to own up to that and then to repair the damage that it caused, that's a stain that lives on that society forever, and it affects everybody in it. And on the smaller level, in a single relationship or in a single life, recognizing that you've done something wrong and then owning up to it, genuinely doing the work to make a change, to repair the damage, do whatever it takes. Sometimes the consequences are the loss of that relationship, that job, that whatever it is that you are trying to protect. But the end of that process, the outcome of that healing, is a life that is more wholesome and well led. And in the world, when I look around, I have very few good examples of people who have done that. And so you listening to this, if you'll put down in the comment section an example of somebody genuinely recognizing they've done something wrong, learning their lesson, and then doing the work to make a change, I feel like a collection of those would be very healing for the public to see, and a wonderful demonstration of leadership from the top down.
If India can discover a way of sublimating the force of violence and turning it into constructive, peaceful ways whereby differences of interests can be liquidated, it will be a great day indeed. Gandhi, August 31st, 1947.
This came late in the game. This was the last year of Gandhi's mortal life, and a very powerful lesson that he had known and experimented with for quite a while, that we all have anger, resentment, some of it righteous indignation, some of it not righteous. It doesn't matter. What matters is that anger is a form of energy, which if we express it as such, if we let anger dictate to us what we should do with that energy, the results are destructive. However, if we draw upon that energy and transmute it into constructive work, that very same energy, at least, maybe even a little bit more, maybe there's an enhancement, but that same driving force of anger, which we had in our psyche, becomes a positive, constructive force.
That term of using anger as a constructive force, I feel like the languaging we use in Taoist medicine and Chinese medicine, the term Qi, That's just the movement, the energy of life. Everything is chi in some form. And that movement in the body-mind that we call anger, which always leads to something destructive. It always leads to injury. That's one way of defining anger, is something that's always destructive and always causes injury, inside and outside. That quality, that energy can be used for something else. We talk about channeling that energy. It can be used for wholesome purposes. It can be used in a way that is not destructive to you or to other people. Again, this courageous chi, this upwelling of energy to protect and defend and do something. It's not the kind of thing that can be sustained, because expending that much chi all the time would wear you out. But from time to time, it's an appropriate thing when you're in the situation where something needs to be protected now. Something has to be done now. You need to be able to gather your resources, pool them together, and apply them towards something important. And when that happens, that's an appropriate expenditure of that energy and a very worthwhile thing to explore.
The prayers of peace lovers cannot go in vain. Gandhi, February 24th, 1946.
As I understand it, Gandhi felt, and this again was based on his experience, if you make a prayer, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you make it vocally, audibly, but if that prayer is selfless, it will have an effect. And you can very much enhance that effect by the important practice of not being attached to the results. That is, the Sanskrit term there was the phalam, the fruit of your action. It's not to be taken for yourself. It's to be taken for others. He said that he could do without food more easily than he could do without prayer. Prayer was his mode of being, and it was really the secret to his effectiveness.
Quite a guy. Lived his life on this path, consistently reaching inward, reaching outward with love, with supplications toward peace, sending those waves and thoughts and feelings out into the world in order to heal others, to prevent injury, to take away the suffering of the people that he cared about. And he cared about an entire nation as his own family. And even when you feel as though your internal desire for peace and love, these deep longings you have to care for the people in your life, to help the people who are injured, to keep safe the people who are in danger, just recognize that the cultivation of that deep unconditional caring and love, that deep cultivation of peace in your own life, it does not go in vain. It is a part of the whole world, and it is making a difference. First cultivate it in yourself, stabilize that, step out into your small local community, spread those waves of peace and love, selflessness, and then see if you step into a larger stage after that. But be very gentle with yourself and recognize that whether it's through prayer or meditation, quiet contemplation, simple presence, those leanings into the quality of peace and contentment, unconditional love and friendliness, it changes you and it changes the community. The more you pay attention to it, the more you'll see that happening. And a little bit at a time, we all make the world a better place.